Welcome to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. This podcast is all about conversations about healing and rising from the ashes of your grief and trauma. In this podcast, we will be deconstructing and highlighting the different aspects of grief and loss. I'm your host, Dr. Christina Zampatella. Welcome to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. I am your host, Dr. Christina Zampatella. We are going to be talking today about EMDR and what the heck EMDR is and how we use it in working with people who are struggling with trauma and also trying to heal from their grief and heal from their traumatic experiences. So who I have with me today are two of my practitioners that work here at the Center for Grief and Trauma Therapy, both who are EMDR trained and practice EMDR techniques. So we're going to talk about, why do I keep using EMDR? What is EMDR? It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Still, that may not make a whole lot of clarity, so we're going to make that clear for you. Here we go. So Marcus and Liz are here, and I'm just going to ask them to go ahead and introduce themselves and tell a little bit about who they are, their background, their educational background, and then we'll go from there. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. You want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm Dr. Elizabeth Mikolajczyk. I'm a licensed psychologist. I actually started out as a school psychologist and moved into more of the clinical side, thanks to Dr. Zampatella dragging me into it. But I fell in love with it, and so I've just been really exploring all of the different tools that are available, and EMDR is one of my new favorites. So.
Awesome. I'm Marcus Scarfo. I'm a counselor and art therapist. I have a master's degree in art therapy and counseling. I'm a licensed professional counselor of mental health and a provisionally registered art therapist. Certified in thanatology, also thanks to being here. Mm-hmm. And Liz, you got your certification in thanatology as well. I work with mostly adults, some adolescents, specialize in grief and trauma.
And just so you guys know, we use the term thanatologist, and that is a specialist in death, loss, and grief. So when you become certified in thanatology, that means that you have gone through a whole bunch of training. You've gone through a testing, a national test. And here in the state of Delaware, which is where we're located, here in the state of Delaware, there is a handful of thanatologists, and most of them are here at the Center for Grief and Trauma Therapy. So I'm going to brag about that because we worked our asses off to get there, and I'm totally cool with that. So EMDR, all right, who wants to start? Let's talk about, what is it?
I always give like the elevator speech, right? Like the EMDR is a tool that we use in therapy to bring down the intensity of the reactions from fear and trauma. So if someone's experienced something awful, typically, the body has a response physically, neurochemically, and that can become almost habitual. And so what we are trying to do with EMDR is to put some water on that fire, to bring the intensity down, to bring the heat down, so that even though they still have those memories, their reaction to it is not going to be as distressing.
Mm-hmm. So it's not like the memories disappear.
Right.
They're going to be there.
Right.
But the intensity of the reaction of it is gone.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So
we're trying to take that sting out of the memory. So we can't change the memory into a good memory. It's always going to be a bad memory. So that terrible thing will always be in their past, but we want to take the sting out of the reaction.
I kind of call it like going from being in pain to having your pain.
Oh, I like that.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I totally stole that.
Okay. All right.
I wish I came up with something like that cool, but I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's when we talk about carrying pain, like trauma, and we talk about this too, but trauma is a memory, an emotional memory. Like, do you have memories of like what happened? Of course you have memories of what happened, but that memory isn't always reliable, especially in hindsight.
Right.
But your emotional memory is very reliable. So you hear people say, oh, I got triggered. Okay, well, what the heck does that mean? Well, I got triggered. So the triggering being, there's a physiological response that you were just talking about, like this rush of this intensity of that fight, flight, fear, or feign dead response. So you go straight into survival mode, which is brilliant. It's brilliant that our bodies do that, but it's not living its purpose now because you're not in that traumatic situation, right?
Right.
So I'm hearing you say that it really is an attempt to make it so that somebody can live with that pain and not be as physiologically activated when they do experience that, and then they weave that experience into their lives versus it being something they're going over and over and over again in their mind where they're ruminating about it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
I like what you said about weaving it into their lives, right? Because this is an approach where we're integrating these memories and these experiences. Because trauma, as you said, we can look at it as a memory, but what makes something traumatic is how it affects us in the present, right? So when these reminders come up and someone becomes triggered, as you said, and they have this intense reaction, emotional, physiological, we're helping them through this process to integrate that memory into long-term, this thing that happened versus feeling like it's happening right now.
How do you know the difference?
That's a good question. How does someone who's experiencing it know the difference between? Well, what in the moment it can be really hard to tell.
There you go. Yeah.
And that's when people experience trauma, really that the thinking brain can become less active when they're triggered, right? The feeling brain is more active, and so they're not able to realize a lot of this, to access this helpful information, these things that would be helpful to know in those moments when these reminders come up.
What might be some important, helpful information for somebody to know in those times?
I mean, I think the most general sense, a very broad one, would be I'm safe right now. Nothing bad is happening, right? But it could be more specific than that. Liz, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I was thinking, as we're going through it, we're teaching them resourcing, and we're teaching them how to be able to bring their own level of heat down. Resourcing is when we help them come up with a toolbox that will allow them to be able to work through that when they get triggered, with or without our help. So things
resourcing being like stuff that you already have,
right,
and linking it to stuff that's not been processed yet.
Right. A lot of times we'll use safe space. So we'll walk them through kind of a place sort of in their imagination where they can kind of go where they know that they're welcomed and feel safe, and they're protected in that space. So they're able to kind of use that as a resource when they're feeling triggered, when they're feeling anxious, or are revisiting that trauma. And we come up with a whole toolbox for them to be able to use when they're in those moments.
When they're in those moments. So you said something really important there. You said coming up with a safe space. Now, as somebody who's also EMDR trained, I'm aware that there is actually like a stepwise process that we have in working with clients who are ready for EMDR. I'm going to come back to that concept. This whole idea of creating safe space. Do you want to explain exactly what that looks like when you are, like if I came to you for, and we're in the middle of working and you go, you know what? I know how to offer EMDR because this is a tool that I have. Not I am an EMDR therapist, but I'm a therapist that uses EMDR. Seems to me that you might be ready, to be able to utilize that. Okay, so now what? What's the first thing we do?
What does it look like to create that safe space?
Like what does that look like?
So first, one thing I like about this is that in terms of parallel, any trauma approach that you take, no matter what you're using, is going to start with establishing safety, all right? And so it falls right in line with that. Now, in EMDR, when we talk about creating a safe place or a calm place as a resource, it's an intervention we use in a session. So we haven't talked about the eye movements yet, or
we haven't even gotten there.
Types of stimulation that we use, which we'll get to. But those mechanisms aren't only used to help people to process distressing material, but also to further enhance things that are positive, right? And so going through a session, I would prompt the client to think of a place where they feel safe, and it could be a place they've been before, a place that they'd like to visit, or a place they create entirely in their imagination. And then go through, tell me what are you seeing and hearing and feeling right now as you imagine this place.
Let's do it.
Right now?
We'll just, yeah, like why not? Instead of, you know what I mean? So I gotta, like, do you guys want to do it, or you want me to do the safe space?
We can do it.
You guys look great together. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So one of us is going to be the client.
Yeah, you do show. Let's show our viewers and let them hear. Like, if I were sitting in a room with you, we're saying, "Oh, create a safe place that that you think about." Yeah, well, let's like actually. It don't have to be long. We'll just make it okay.
And just to be clear, I'm going to say what I'm thinking, like as the client, but the client does not have to share this. It can be entirely private. So Marcus could be coaching them through their safe space, and all I need to know is a cue word as the therapist. But like for today, just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to share what I'm
is that
thinking.
cool?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Okay. All right. So it might be a little awkward positioning.
I know. By the way, you're not this close to each other, like at all. Okay, well, that's important for us to say. Like, I'm not going to be just like, hey.
But we already have rapport.
Yes,
so
it
that's
was good.
All right. Okay, so let's say I'm going to help you to create a safe place. It can be helpful to have this before we start to open up any distressing memories. So have a way to close them back up, or you can use this between sessions if you need to, if distressing feelings arise.
Okay.
So I'd like you to imagine a place where you feel safe or calm.
Okay.
And that could be a place that you've been before. It could be a place you'd like to visit. It could be a place you just create entirely in your imagination. I'd like you to think about that. Just take some time, reflect on it. And when you have something in mind, let me know.
Okay, I'm thinking about like a cabin in the mountains.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'd like you to focus on that cabin in the mountains. Okay. Think about that image of the cabin. And as you focus on it, tell me about what you're seeing, hearing, and feeling in this place.
I'm seeing outside. I'm seeing a lot of open space, some trees. Okay. There's a stream nearby. And I can hear the babbling of the stream. And then when I go inside the cabin, I can see like a little kitchenette. There's a bedroom. There's an upstairs, the stairs leading to upstairs. And then there's some windows that are letting a lot of light in.
Okay.
And there's a fireplace.
That sounds wonderful. All right. I'd like you to continue focusing on that. Okay. And as you do, notice any pleasant sensations that arise, maybe any sensations in your body.
Okay. I feel the breeze on my skin, and I can smell like I don't know how to describe, like the natural smell, like dirt and the leaves. I can smell like the mustiness of the cabin, and I can feel like in my body I'm feeling calm. I feel warm, but not hot.
Okay.
And then, the cool breeze on my skin.
Okay. So I'd like you to continue focusing on all of those sights and sounds, smells, right, sensations that you mentioned. Right. Notice where you feel those pleasant sensations in your body.
Okay.
And focus on those. And we would start the eye movements here.
This is where eye movements would start.
Right.
First off, great job.
Thanks.
Second, I want to hang out with the cabin.
That sounds like a great
Me
place
too.
to be.
Is it a 2-bedroom or is it a 1-bedroom? Because I can be quiet and hang out over here. So now let's talk about passes and eye movements, because I think that's what a lot of people associate EMDR with. Like, here's the fingers, but there's other ways of doing it as well. So we can talk about passes with fingers. We can talk about the paddles. I actually have the paddles. I can bring those out and show those now that I think about it. But let's talk about passes.
Okay.
The heck are those, and why do we use them?
Okay. Do you want to take this one? Or
Sure. Yeah. The passes. The idea is that the whatever sensory style you use, whether it's the eye movement, or if you're holding the paddles, it's tactile. That you can also use auditory. Whatever it is crossing the midline of the body. So, frequently I'll have to like remind my clients not to hold the paddles like this. Open up your hands. It's supposed to cross the midline of the body. The eye movement, there's different theories about why that brings down the intensity in the anxiety, the fear response in the brain. But there is definitely quite a bit of research to show that it definitely does have a positive effect on the fear response. So the idea is that as you're going through this trauma in your brain and you're working through this story, as you're doing the eye movements or whatever, bilateral stimulation is what we call it, bilateral stimulation, BLS. As you're going through that, you're seeing this trauma, but you're also bringing down the fear response. So that's the theory behind.
So it's working on a neurobiological level.
Yes.
by connecting both sides of your brain. It's kind of, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, I think I got it, but there's some theories that this is kind of similar to like REM sleep. Like something's going
That's
on
one
where
of the
we are,
theories.
that's one of the theories, is that there's a reason why we go back and forth when we're processing things.
Right. Another theory is that like when you are in a scary situation, the eye movement, like the going back and forth, is what happens when you're running away from something that's scary. So, that's kind of the way that your body would normally move away from scary stuff. And so it kind of brings down that anxiety.
So then in using our fingers, like, and we can just do like just basic 101, what is, bilateral, what does that look like? So if I were sitting across from you, there's a whole other level of safety, right? I go, what I'm trying to do is figure out how far away from you is comfortable, how quickly you want me to go back and forth. Now, so it's not that I'm sitting like this, directly across from you.
Right.
As the person, the therapist, we're kind of sitting a little bit off from one
We call
another.
it kind of passing ships.
Right.
Passing
So scoot over here.
scoot this
Get
way?
closer. Yeah. Get closer. Hey guys, now get real close. Okay. So I would, as we were just beginning, I would say, I'm going to bring my fingers in and out, and you let me know when you're at your level of comfort. Okay. So we're here. I come here.
It's a little close.
Too
Maybe
close?
lower back, right about there.
Right about there. Okay, good. So that's the distance. You are in complete control. And I think that's one of the things we really need to talk about here is that even though I might be the therapist that's providing the EMDR, ultimately the client is always the one that's in control the whole time. You are never at the mercy of that. So it starts just as quickly as you picking out your safe space, but also, us being able to do this. So here you are. Now we're going to talk about how quickly I go back and forth with my fingers, because I can go like this. Is that too fast?
A little quick.
A little too fast. Okay.
Could you go a little wider on the passes?
There you
Right
go.
about there, yeah, and a little faster. Right about there is good.
Good. And that's my workout for the day.
Yeah.
Screw that.
Just a
I'm
little
not
shoulder
doing it.
workout.
A little shoulder. That's it. If you've got shoulder issues, your therapist will not do this. So we're here. Now, when we talk about passes, I might say, okay, this is, this is as many passes as we're going to do here, or
Right.
my passes might happen at certain particular times in our conversation, because I'm trying to make it so that you're not so overwhelmed that you're shutting down your entire the processing aspect of the work that we're doing. We don't want you flooded, in other words.
No, we want to keep it in that window of tolerance.
We want to keep it in the window of tolerance.
Right.
And window of tolerance means
It's just like what you were saying. When we get to the upper boundary of the window of tolerance, we get overstimulated, we get distressed. That's when you start to see that panic response. When we get too low in the window of tolerance, that's when we get the shutdown. And
Like
so
the
we want to make sure
depression, low energy.
I can't do anything.
Gotcha.
I can't function. And so we want to keep it inside that. We want to expand the window of tolerance. A lot of people have, after trauma, they'll have a much more narrow window of tolerance. We want to expand that, but we definitely want to stay within that while we're working.
So that's in the window of tolerance. I've kind of, in my mind, I've always seen it as a person's ability to think and feel even when they're experiencing the memory or something distressing.
Right. They're still functional.
Right.
Right.
And that changes every day for everybody.
Right.
If you're stressed
Right.
out about what's going on at work,
That's a great
and
point.
you know what I mean?
If you're
like,
having a bad day, your
you're-
window of tolerance is maybe a lot smaller.
if we've got the 3 boys at the house and I've got the Delaware Wrecking Crew hanging out, my window of tolerance might be a little smaller that day than, where I'm like, that's my window of tolerance. It is a little 4x4 cube, and that's all I got.
Stamp.
That's a little postage stamp. So, and I might be, bringing up memories that are making my window of tolerance a little bit smaller. So here's another question I have. Do I have to talk about every single one of my traumas?
No, and that's one of my favorite things about EMDR.
Oh, okay.
Is that the client can share as much or as little with the therapist as they feel comfortable with. All of the work is being done, we're just a guide. All of the work is being done by the client in their head. So if they feel like they want to share what's going on in their head, they absolutely can. Of course, it's always confidential in our office, but they go through so many things, and if there's something that they're not comfortable with exposing, that's okay. They can continue to work on it privately. We're just guiding them through it because we're always watching really carefully their appearance. Like, I'm watching their breathing, I'm watching their body language, I'm watching any micro expressions they may be having. So I'm picking up on those things. I don't necessarily need them to tell me where they're at. I will say, practicing EMDR as a therapist, I've really had to hone my powers of observation. I have to watch very carefully what their responses are. Yeah.
And it can be different for each client too.
Oh, it absolutely
so really
is.
Getting to know, we always get to know our clients, but getting to know them really well, know what their cues are and everything, and that's how we kind of determine how long to do the passes.
Right.
And when we start to see, the intensity kind of lessening. Maybe a clenching jaw or breathing rate.
Right. Or their hands relax or shoulders go down. Yeah.
So you just said something kind of important is, I'm looking for things in my client that I know about them.
Right.
So, hi, I know Marcus does EMDR. I'd like to come in and do EMDR. By the way, for people who are listening, I'm holding up a fake phone. If you're not watching this,
if you
it's
do this
like
as the phone,
as
by
the
the
phone.
way, this tells our age.
Especially if you hang it up like that.
I didn't hang it up. I didn't do this. Or not on a rotary phone. I'm like, we're not doing okay. But if I'm calling the front desk and I'm like, hey, I'm calling, I want to get EMDR.
Well, not everyone might not be ready for EMDR right away, right? And it's not always appropriate, right? So we always have to determine that first. So there may be times when it's not the appropriate form of treatment, right then, or and even if it is, there's still a preparation phase. Right? So you're not just gonna walk into the office and first session we're doing passes. Right? Like there's a whole process to it.
There's history taking. There's the preppers. There's like several steps before you even what people usually think of as EMDR is the eye passes, and I think that's like starts in step 4, 5. Like we're not starting with that right away anyway. There's a whole assessment process that has to happen.
Absolutely.
Because what are we looking for?
I mean, part of it is what is the window of tolerance, right? It's stability, right? Like if someone's experiencing, active suicidal ideation or homicidal ideation, or
meaning feeling suicidal or homicidal.
Right.
Okay.
Hallucinations.
Hallucinations.
Major dissociations. So like you're disconnected. I try not to use too much psychobabble, but so where when you get overwhelmed, you just detach from your body.
From reality and
reality. If you're doing that, you're not ready. We don't want to make it worse.
Because another thing that I want to point out about EMDR is myth busting here.
Yeah.
It is not hypnosis. Hypnosis is like you're in the space. You are in that place that you were at. Like you're kind of taking your brain back to that, and that's where you think you are. We are never doing that in EMDR. You are always in my office. You are always safe. And my voice is going to keep reminding you that you are in my office and you are safe. So I think that's a important differentiation to make between those two.
Yeah, and we're not putting any information there that's not already there.
Right. Yeah, that's important too. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. If you found this podcast helpful, please share it, subscribe, and leave a rating or review wherever you get your podcasts. We want to be a resource for anyone who is experiencing loss, and this is a simple way you can help us spread the word. Check out our show description. There you'll find a link to connect with me on social media, as well as helpful articles and resources.